I was in third grade and I was having a sleepover at my friend's house. And it was the time of night where, like, everybody else in the house was asleep. All the lights were off. And it was me and her in her room. Well, I was going to say we were sleeping on the floor in our sleeping bags, but we were just hanging out on the floor in our sleeping bags. And we just had like a night light on in the room. So I don't know if we were telling each other scary stories or not, but somehow we started to get really freaked out and we heard footsteps. I think like walking down the hallway. Her bedroom door was closed and we heard footsteps. And of course, it couldn't have been her mom or dad or brother or sister who also were in the house. It had to have been since it was nighttime and we knew we knew everyone was asleep. We just knew it had to be an intruder and that intruder was walking around their house and that the intruder of course was going to like come into where we were. So that's what we decided. So we convinced ourselves of that and we were just absolutely terrified. Like we were as terrified as you would feel if you were actually like home alone and heard footsteps. Like that's how terrified we were. Um, I don't know why we decided that it wasn't anyone else in her family. We just decided it wasn't. It couldn't have been. And so therefore something terrifying was happening. So we were freaked out, scaring ourselves. And I don't remember how long this went on, but we ended up like huddled on her bottom bunk together and just holding each telling each other it's been nice knowing you. And we were like staring at the door handle on her bedroom door and convinced ourselves that we saw it slowly turning. It wasn't. It was not turning. So I don't know how we eventually, I think I remember just kind of being like, nothing happened. And so I guess we just found a way to like fall asleep. I don't know if we like shared the bottom bunk or something because we were so scared. Somehow, after that terrifying moment, we were able to fall asleep. And of course, we woke up safe. Everyone was fine. I don't even know if we told anyone in her family the next day about it. I think we just had this thing that was always like, remember that scary thing? Like, why would it not have been like her dad getting up to get like a drink of water or use the bathroom, or maybe her little brother wanted to like sneak around the house with while everyone was asleep, or I don't know. Like, it could have been a million things, but no, we were so scared. We decided it was none of the rational explanations. It was the scary one that made no sense. Why am I telling you this story? This story came to mind tonight as I was thinking about like fear and it's just fear is an interesting thing because you may have seen previous videos where I share just kind of like sensing things ahead of time. And so it's interesting because we have to be careful that like we don't follow after things that, here's what I'm trying to say. You could be feeling fear, but it might not be accurate. It might not be matching a real situation. I can't tell you in your own specific situations which fears are valid and which ones aren't. I just know that when I was in third grade, I had decided something was the case, and therefore it was terrifying and happening, and it wasn't. And so we can be very, very mistaken with our fears. It's also interesting because my husband and I have gotten into a show called The Traitors. I don't know if you've been watching it, but like there's like a US version, a UK version. I found the Australian version, a New Zealand version. Anyway, so we've been watching a lot of the show called The Traitors. Okay, there's a lot of super cheesy parts to it, but it's a very, very insightful game because if you haven't seen it, basically some people are chosen to be traitors, and there's traitors and faithful, and the people who are faithful in the game are trying to root out the traitors. So it's kind of like you have people lying. There's a certain amount of people lying to people, and people are trying to figure out who is lying. that's the short, very simplified version of it. The reason I'm bringing it up is because it has been very, very interesting to watch this show and watch people absolutely convinced that someone is a traitor, that this person is lying or being dishonest or acting sneaky or acting this way, or, oh, you said this. That is the only possible reason that you said that was because you must be a traitor. And it's so sad to watch people get it's kind of like a voting off show. So these people who are trying to find out who the liars are in this game end up absolutely convinced that people are lying, that they're the traitors of the game, and they end up voting off people who are completely innocent and not lying and not being deceptive. And it's so fascinating to watch person after person after person saying, I'm just going with my gut here and I'm voting for this person. And then this like, ooh. So it's tricky because I've said in previous videos that I have had moments where I did know certain things, but I guess I just would never call it just, I'm going to just go with my gut, because just going with your gut that phrasing may not necessarily reflect what I'm talking about here. Here's where I'm going with this. There are times where our fears and what we think is our gut can be off. But I also want to mention all of this stuff about fear, and then thinking about the Trader Show and how people could be wrong about suspecting someone or thinking someone is something else. I actually do want to mention a really, really, really helpful, good, potentially safety-saving book that I read years ago, and it was so insightful, and it's called The Gift of Fear. I will put, like in the description below, I'll put a link to it. For like, I think there's places you can buy it you can support independent sellers, that kind of thing. So I will put a link to it down below, but it is called The Gift of Fear, and I currently can't remember the author, but it is written by a criminal profiler, and he writes all about how in so many cases where things went wrong, victims often would say, like, I couldn't put my finger on it, but something wasn't right. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because I want to say, if you're wanting to figure out in some situations when to go with that, like, something just wasn't right. Something just wasn't right. This guy actually gives logical explanations for why people in certain situations have that feeling, and that it's not always just like a supernatural, like, ooh, I just knew. There are sometimes just straight up either scientific or subtle cues that we are picking up on from other people that clue us in that something that we need to be alert. It's so good. So if you are someone who has been trying to figure out, like, well, how do I know what to, if I'm feeling unsure or nervous about a person or something, this book might be really helpful to you. Now, I do want to put, like, what do you call it? Like a content warning. It does occasionally describe things that have happened to people, like criminal cases that this guy describes, and he describes them so that he can analyze it and tell you what the person was picking up on. And anyways, there are things that can be a little bit disturbing, so just know that going into ahead of time. But the book is called The Gift of Fear, and it's incredible. I've used it in excuse me, still getting over my cough. I've used it in many situations and interactions with people. When I was a cashier, when I worked at an office supply store, and there were customers that would come in and like say certain things that I read about in that book, and I was like, oh, they're saying that thing, and I read about that, and that means I should be a little bit cold or distant, or anyway, I could go on and on and on. But the book, The Gift of Fear, I think will be really helpful for those of you who want to figure out some really practical ways to be alert and notice your surroundings, notice words and phrases that people say that when you hear them, you can be like, oh, that's not good. Or just situations. Anyways, I think I've shared enough about that. Hopefully you were entertained by my intro story about me and my friend scaring ourselves. So just know, sometimes we feel scared of things that are not actually dangerous. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we're picking up on things. Um, of course, I believe there's supernatural aspects to that as well, but there's also just straight up scientific things that we're picking up on sometimes. Anyways, check it out. I'll put the link in the description. Thanks for watching.